Tonight, our guest is Steve Quayle. I'll call him survivalist. There's so much to talk with Steve Quayle about tonight that I'm going to divide tonight's program up with him in various segments because their topics are just absolutely riveting. In a moment, when we come back, we're going to talk about the possibility of a real or faked alien invasion. Also get his take on his new book called Return of the Longwalkers, which ties his research into the Genesis 6 giants. Next hour, we'll talk about Stephen's true fear, his real concern about World War III. Steve Quayle, he's done a number of incredible research books, including his latest, Return of the Longwalkers. He has written books on bioterrorism, and he continues to warn the public about the dangers of all of these areas. Tonight, Steve Quayle. Stephen, my friend, how are you?
Good evening, George. I'm well, thank you. It's going to be nice to talk about so many varied subjects.
My gosh, you've been doing your homework, my friend.
Well, I have, and just the whole alien card now is coming out. Obviously, the statements from the Vatican preparing people for the eventual encounter with aliens, the wars in the heavens, so to speak, people seeing triangular-shaped craft all over the world. You know, George, it used to be random sightings, and the UFO guys would have to run down every sighting, and now there are so many sightings and so many credible sightings that it's very hard for the powers that be to deny it, and I believe they're getting ready to stage and use the alien information to benefit the one-world government by obviously keeping information from not only the American people but the people of the world. They can therefore use it to their advantage when they need to. So whether they're staging a real alien invasion or they're going to break ranks and allow more information to come out, we're right there in time, and it ties in with all the stuff we're going to talk about tonight.
Stephen, years ago, Werner von Braun told his aide, Carol Rosen, and Werner, of course, came from Germany under Operation Paperclip and was probably one of those persons who truly was responsible for the rocketry which got us to the moon. He told her to be ready one day for a faked alien invasion that will see this planet become a one-world government, that will see this planet push more toward a military rule and leadership. And, you know, he might not be wrong. Yeah,
I don't think he's wrong, George. I think he pretty much gave it away, let the cat out of the bag, because, again, in all the years that I've been writing what I've been writing about, investigating, talking to people in the intelligence community, the military, there is a whole world out there that basically is, I would call, the real world. Well, those of us who are trying to break through and break the veil so that people can understand the way the world globalist, the world elite, is going to use this to basically bring us under. Obviously, if a threat is so great that only by binding or coming together as a world global population, a global entity to take on this threat from outer space, obviously you can see that the people that are going to generate the problem have got the solution. That solution basically is the new world order, the one world government with the rise of an individual that supposedly was going to promise the planet peace. Obviously, we know that that turns the planet into a totalitarian hellhole and obviously puts us into a state of prophetic reality that most people basically will maybe wink at, but when their eyes are wide open and see this stuff, it's going to be more than people standing on a building like a scene from Independence Day. It's going to be in total devastation, in my opinion. And, again, we're now seeing the point where they can no longer keep everything under wraps, because one thing people got to understand, the New World Order has factions. Those factions are fighting, and there are some amazing men and women who are fighting those factions, and the whole revelation of UFOs, ancient technology, the war that's really in what I would call the spiritual realm, the fallen angels, angels, if you will, that have had their wings clipped and now have to resort to a technology that's so vastly superior to what most people think is the Saturn rocket mentality and technology. Again, we're out there already. As I've stated on your show many times, people can't imagine the technology that we now possess, whether it's reverse engineered or the actual integration of agreements, which I believe the fallen angels have made with different governments, and with the promise of alleviating things like global famine, being able to control the weather. And by the way, I think that this plays into some of the eyewitness accounts of people seeing strange craft in the middle of the hurricanes that are being generated. I'm on record as stating that we absolutely have the ability to generate hurricanes, as do the Russians, as do the Chinese, and the weather wars taking place, and the craft, the unusual craft that are being involved in the sightings are prima facie evidence to me that we're right there at that point in time.
Stephen, what have you uncovered about Project Bluebeam?
Well, Project Bluebeam is like so many of the projects that exist. Obviously, Norio Hayakawa was one that brought a lot of Bluebeam out, but basically the ability to holographically project three-dimensional images, and not only by using a if you will, space-based laser platforms, but being able to use infrasound to accompany, if you will, the voice of God being placed into people's minds. In other words, bypassing their ears and going directly into the auditory cortex in the brain. So Project Bluebeam is a real project, and it's going to be interesting because there's going to come a time when it's going to be hard to separate what is an image or an illusion versus what's the real. And if the real is, quote, almost like a fantasy image, then obviously if the fantasy images can be scary enough or upsetting enough, then people will believe what they're being told. And obviously, if you're generating the threat, and if you're able, through technology, to scare the daylights out of the planetary population, then they'll surrender whatever they can or whatever they have to acquire that peace and safety.
Give me your scenario if Project Bluebeam is undertaken.
Well, first of all, I think that we would have worldwide sightings, and we would be hearing that the United Nations is having emergency sessions. I mean, this is scripted in so many of the science fiction movies, George.
It sure is.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, my position is simply that science fiction movies were leaked. A lot of the real information was leaked to Hollywood.
Sounds like Independence Day, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then by leaking the information to Hollywood and different studios, and the tie-in between, for instance, Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry, the originator of Star Trek, for example, was very, very tight with the Central Intelligence Agency. But it's not just Gene. It was the entire Hollywood community that would be tipped off. Most people don't realize that probably one of the lead alien investigators, the man that owns the most implants and does his own funding of this, is Steven Spielberg.
That's right.
Tom Horn has an amazing story to talk about because I believe it was his niece that was abducted, and had Spielberg knew about her abduction and was literally debriefed by the Spielberg crew. So the fact of abductions, too, this is something we've got to talk about. The fact of abductions plays into the whole Genesis 6 genetic engineering, genetic manipulation. It's funny that in almost every abduction, the sexual probing, the withdrawal of either an egg from the female, sperm from the male, if you will, the sexual violation that so many of these abductees have experienced, it all goes right back to that human-animal or that human-alien hybridization, with the movies like The X-Files or the different stories that have been out there that of the crossing of alien-human species. Now, this is, as you know, my position is that it took place in ancient times when the fallen angels, who were able to materialize into the realm of humans, had sex with earth women, producing the giants. Genesis 6 talks about, which became obviously the mighty men of old, mighty men of renown, the giants, if you will, the Herculean figures of history. But now they're doing it a different way, George. The secret labs, this is something I think that when I've literally talked to men who have enough stars on their
lapels on his shoulders,
Yeah, I'm not talking about people that are retired for 40 years. I'm talking active duty. And when they're telling me they have to deal with things that, if you've ever seen the movie The Cave and the Descent, they're telling me of stories that literally when some of the bravest and some of the toughest, the most dangerous men in the world, literally encounter this stuff and what has to happen in order to fight these things, I'm telling you, it takes a whole level of unreality out of the equation and puts you immediately thrust into a world that has been, if you will, matrixed or kept from us, and I'm wondering how people are going to adjust